recording on. Are we set to go, Diana?
Yeah, we're all set. I just got the recording going.
Thank you. Welcome everybody to the March 2021 meeting of Community Board 1's Land Use, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee. We have two items on the agenda tonight, both rather substantial pieces of legislation, one at the state level and one at the city level regarding land use and planning. So first, we're going to start with the state item, which our Quality of Life Committee delved into and wrote a resolution about last month. This is on repurposing underutilized commercial space for housing. We're going to have a presentation by two folks from our friend Senator Brian Kavanaugh's office. Andra Stanley, who's the Housing Committee Director and Counsel, as well as Lizzie Lee, who's Community Liaison. We're going to have a discussion and a possible resolution. And just to very briefly frame this, this is around the governor's proposal in the legislature to convert some hotel space and possibly office space to residential. And there are concerns around what that looks like in our area and whether the legislation pinpoints the right types of properties. So with that, are Andra and Lizzie on with us?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Just for a quick intro, I think you guys all know me by now, but Andra has also been so kind to give her time to CB1's previous committee meetings. She is our House Director as well as Counsel. And, you know, I think we're going to have more of a discussion on the residential to commercial to residential override proposal. If Andra, you had any thoughts first.
No, I guess I should say off the bat, this is less of a presentation. I can give a brief overview of what was proposed, but I was hoping this would be more of a discussion. But so the executive budget, for those who aren't aware, doesn't just include things that you might think of as a budget. It also includes what we consider Article 7 legislation, meaning things that don't really revolve around the spending or revenue, but just things that the governor basically wants to do and chooses to put in his budget. And because we have an executive budget system in the state of New York, he can kind of do that. So one of these proposals is TED Part L, which creates two different zones in the city of New York that would be used to convert commercial or hotel space into affordable housing. Senator Kavanaugh and I have a lot of issues with the current proposal. It doesn't define what affordable housing is. For the purposes of commercial rezoning, it takes a square and it's a rectangle, and it is mostly Midtown Manhattan. For the purposes of hotel space, it cuts off right at Chambers, so it doesn't really get to Lower Manhattan. And the proposal is one that was first kind of offered at the suggestion of Remney, but we don't think it has been fully fleshed out. We have a bill, S 4973 or 4793, that seeks to kind of expedite conversions from hotels to long-term permanent affordable housing. This proposal would allow hotels within 800 feet of residential zoning to convert while keeping their certificates of occupancy. If you know anything about hotel conversions, converting hotels to residential is really difficult because hotels only have to be ADA compliant in 5% of the rooms. Residential has to be ADA meaning if you've ever been in a Manhattan hotel, you know there's really tiny bathrooms, really narrow hallways. Basically, all of that infrastructure has to be ripped up and, sorry, I froze. I don't know. all of that infrastructure really can't be maintained, so it makes it cost prohibitive to convert to housing. So this would allow units to be transferred over while keeping their same certificates of occupancy. This proposal has the support of the Supportive Housing Network, the New York Housing Conference, the New York State Association of Affordable Housing Developers. That is not the correct words for the NYSAFA acronym, but my apologies. And we are working really hard to either make this standalone proposal that succeeds or a part of the current budget process. But if anyone would like, I'd rather just open it up to questions because it's a long and complicated issue if anyone has any.
I think that's great, and thanks for kicking that off, Sandra. So just to understand the legislation that your office is proposing, is that in response to what the governor proposed, or was that something that Brian had out there before?
So we think that they're in the core of what the governor is proposing. There is a good idea. We do not think that the language he has proposed in 10 Part L, even with the revisions and the 30-day amendments, is the way to do it. So we actually talk to the people who do this, the people who build and manage supportive housing in the city of New York, and this is the solution that they all put forward as far as what we can do on the state level to really help these conversions come along.
Okay. And before we open it up for more committee members' comments and questions, I wanted to point out, as Diana has communicated to all of us on the committee, she circulated some materials over the weekend, including the resolution that Community Board 1 adopted in February as a reminder, which came out of our Quality of Life Committee. And there were a number of issues that we've had with this, with the idea as proposed by the governor, at least, in terms of whether the hotels in our area should be included because they're specially built hotel buildings as opposed to former residences that were converted to hotels and would be converted back to residences, which is kind of what the governor's plan envisions, at least from the hoteling perspective. So if folks want to pull that up, it's a really short but very direct and good resolution. That would be helpful. So do any members of the committee have questions or thoughts? Anything you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, not sure how to do this.
Alice, you can jump right in there. I'm not seeing any hands up. Oh, Michael Francoeur has his hand up, and so does Rosa.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, thanks, and I have to preface this, which I'm not very familiar at all. So I'm just curious why it didn't go south of Chambers Street. Not that it should have, but I'm just curious why that was the demarcation zone.
You would have to ask the governor that. That is his language. Even Rebney isn't really sure how they created their geographic zones. So unfortunately, I can't answer that.
Okay, thanks.
Michael and then Rosa.
Yeah, that was actually my question as well. So you can go on to Rosa. Thanks.
Okay. Rosa, then Tammy.
Hi, thank you. Hi, thank you. So I was wondering, is your amendment or response to it to actually include Lower Manhattan, first of all?
So this standalone piece of legislation does not have any geographic restrictions. It would be the entire city, so long as the hotel is within 800 feet of a place zoned as residential. Because we don't want to put people who need extra supportive services in areas where those aren't available to them.
Right, and I'm actually happy that you brought that up because is my understanding correct from what you just told us that you are saying that hotels as they stand that would be non-compliant as residential would be accepted or grandfathered in as residential under this legislation?
So at the end, yes, they could be grandfathered in as residential, but there are some intervening steps I missed. they have to be used as 100% affordable housing, and they have to be run by affordable housing provider that is approved by HPD. So the city is great relationships with the supportive housing providers in the city. So they would be able to be the ones who came up with a list of, providers that they would allow to take advantage of this program. So not anyone could come in and say, oh, I want to turn this into housing and be able to do so. It would be, supportive housing providers with a track record of approved by the HPD to do those conversions.
Okay. And so basically that would mean that these hotels that currently have 5% accessibility or ADA compliance and bathrooms that are not to residential code would be accepted for the affordable housing conversions. And my concern there is that not a lot, but there is a noticeable or significant portion of people who are going to be applying for that affordable housing that do have accessibility needs. And how will that be addressed?
So I just want to be clear. Right now, hotels have to have 5% ADA compliant rooms, meaning those are already built out. There are already bars in the bathrooms. The hallways are wide enough. The doorways are wide enough. In order for a residential building to be ADA compliant, those structures don't have to be in place. It just has to be possible that if you wanted to build those out, those can be built out. So most residential actually doesn't already have the structures in place to be ADA compliant. So while it's true that you wouldn't be able to turn probably more than 5%, 5% is still more than you're seeing in a lot of residential buildings right now. If anything, you can make a set aside and mandate that 5% of units have to be used for people who require ADA compliance, and you would still end up with more housing, more accessible housing than you're normally getting otherwise.
Okay, I guess, and how about, a lot of hotels don't actually have kitchens, or if they do, they have pseudo coffee bar kitchenette things. I'm wondering, can you just confirm for me that the hotels that are converted to residential will have full kitchens?
I can't do that. There is nothing that would require full kitchen build outs, because once you start getting into full kitchen build outs, one, it becomes cost prohibitive to do without an influx of, quite frankly, a lot of cash. Right now, what we see is if you could have a $200,000 per room acquisition rate and like a $200,000 to $250,000 conversion rate, then that's a viable pathway for an affordable housing provider. But if you require kitchens or kitchenettes built out in every unit, it becomes cost prohibitive, and you might as well just build new units at that point. And also, I would say that to the extent that light, air, and some building and fire code requirements would need to be in place in order to do build outs for kitchens, because obviously that infrastructure is not in place in a hotel. You would have to have ducting available for all the new kitchens, and the light and air requirements in a hotel room are lower than on a residential unit. And at least I personally wouldn't want to have an apartment that is a former hotel room with one tiny window that may open a smidge that you're now putting a kitchen in. So it becomes cost prohibitive, because likely you would have to start combining units to add a kitchen. And then at that point, if you've gone from 10 units on a floor to 5 units on the floor at the same acquisition rate, it's really hard to make the math work on that.
Right, but that's an investment from the developer side. But I think that it's cost prohibitive to the person who is in affordable housing to have to basically purchase all of their meals outside because they don't have a kitchen. I think that I mean, I think that in what's considered a residential context, a kitchen is absolutely as necessary as a bathroom is, because everybody needs to eat and everybody needs to, you know, get rid of their waste product after they eat. So how, I mean, that's actually frankly really alarming to me, that and super concerning that a kitchen is considered non-essential in this scenario. And I would hope that in the legislation, the only conversions that you would consider are the ones that have the capacity to be able to incorporate a kitchen, a kitchenette into those units. So perhaps they're more like fully built out with some existing infrastructure for kitchens, and then the kitchen is just enlarged, or the kitchen stays as it is. But that would, to me, that's just not conscionable in terms of the context of affordable housing, or any kind of housing, whether it's affordable or not, frankly.
So
I have to say, I'm absolutely in support of the idea of converting underutilized commercial space into affordable housing. And we absolutely, as a city, need more affordable housing. So I hope that some version of this passes, but I think that we have to consider the minimum, the absolute minimum of what we are willing to accept as livable, habitable space for people. And to me, that includes a kitchen, and that includes accessibility. So that's, you know, that's it for my questions. I don't want to hog all the time, but I think those are really, really important issues that we need to consider if we're actually going to do this.
So I just want to say, I'm not saying that there aren't going to be kitchens on premises. I'm just saying that each unit would likely not be sited with a kitchen. And to the extent that you would be looking for hotels with that infrastructure in place, to be honest, those don't exist. We have been working with affordable housing providers, or providers of supportive housing, who are in the street, like looking at the apartments, or sorry, looking at the hotels that may or may not be available. You know, no hotel is really officially for sale, but you can still go visit many hotels that they will give you a sale price for. And the ones with the long-term, the ones with infrastructure to have kitchen sited in each unit are just simply, those just simply aren't available right now. So I think it is a laudable goal to include kitchens in each unit for supportive housing. That requires either an influx of state and federal money that doesn't exist right now, or building up from scratch, because those units are just unavailable for conversion at the moment.
I actually know of at least 2 that are available downtown in our area. So they and I know for sure at least one has shuttered permanently. So
but if you're over $200,000, $250,000 a room for an acquisition price, it's just not doable for supportive housing providers.
I understand that, but if the hotel is permanently shuttered, then I'm guessing their price is pretty negotiable. Anyways, I don't want to get into the detailed nitty gritty of this, but I do think that there are options available. And to me, those factors that I mentioned earlier are critical and necessary and essential, not add-ons. Okay, sorry. I know that took a lot of time. I had a lot of questions. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you for all the answers, Andra.
We're going to go to Tammy, then Vicki Cameron, Michael Kramer, and then back to Alice.
Hey, thanks. I'm sorry if I was unmuted the whole time and you heard my kids in the background playing catch. So apologies. I want to say thank you very much, Andra, for coming. And I hear where Rosa's going. We actually have, according to the Downtown Alliance report, 3 hotels that have permanently closed that are south of Chambers Street. So, you know, you can imagine from our perspective, it's extremely important to be included in this, depending on how it's going to work. It is something that we did pass before to be included. And one of the things that I've heard time and time again is the reference that even kids who grow up in this neighborhood can't afford to live here post-college, right? Or after high school or things like that. So whether or not a hotel could turn into an SRO with a mini kitchen, is that a possibility that would end up being for more of, the youth who come into the neighborhood, or the youth who, who are working in the cafes and coffee shops and things like that? Would those kinds of turns be possible?
So there is nothing in our legislation, or even in the governor's legislation for that matter, that dictates on the inhabitants of any converted housing. Our legislation just requires that a supportive housing provider approved by HPD would be the one implementing the program. So there is no constraints on who would or wouldn't be able to live there. I will note that I am remiss to have not led in the beginning that Deputy Majority Leader Janaris also has a bill that is seeking to kind of do similar things, but that bill it runs starts at Chambers down and 110th and up, and would provide permanent affordable housing for those who have experienced homelessness or are currently experiencing homelessness. It creates a fund for the state to acquire those properties. It does not contain any language that would grandfather them into their current C of Os, so they would still be required to do a full conversion required to become a residential property. But I was remiss to not mention that from the start.
That's
there are
okay.
multiple proposals on this issue.
Well, my second question, and I'm sorry, Patrick, I have a few. My second question was, part of the budget that really sort of tweaked me was the idea and concept that even if our zone was added, that there was a possibility that the developer could pile money into a fund instead of providing affordable housing, and provide and basically build as of right as they wanted. Is that still a part of this?
The 30-day amendments from the governor have actually removed the off-siting or the funding of off-site affordable housing. So no, it's not still part of it.
Thank you on that. And then that's such better news. I hadn't expected that. I forgot the third point. It'll come back to me, and I'll come back to you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Tammy. Let's go to Vicki Cameron, then Michael Kramer, then Alice. Vicki, you with us? Can you unmute?
I apologize. I gave the whole
there you are.
introduction. I apologize. Thank you, Patrick. Just wanted to comment on Andrew's introduction. Andrew, I always have to say this, I try not to, but as an architect and one who has worked on hotel designs over several years and built several hotels in New York City, I will tell you that there are many more options to convert a hotel into affordable housing, with the idea that people are more desperate to have a place to reside, a place to feel comfortable in, more so than the city and federal agencies enforcing things like HPD or ADA to the extent that they do. There are many countries in this world, as a colleague of mine said, nobody goes to war more than Israel, and Israel does not have the ridiculous ADA requirements that we do. So the idea is that there are terrific opportunities, and I'm in complete agreement with taking hotels and converting them. Yes, you do have to take those tiny rooms we do and put, combine a couple into a 1 or 2 bedroom. There are extended stay hotels that have kitchenettes, which is a different definition than for a kitchen. What you need to do as our politician leaders is understand that having permanent housing is far more important than bickering about small details. The corridors are all at least 3 feet wide. No handicapper in a wheelchair needs more than 2 feet to get by. If someone comes by, I'll step out of the way if it's not big enough. People need affordable permanent housing, and I really do plead with the politician to understand that this is far more important and doable with the infrastructure that we currently have, as long as we make some reasonable realistic changes to our law requirements. Is that possible? And you should, by the way, instead of speaking to more politicians and developers, the city should reach out to architects like us who build this stuff, who know the stuff inside out, and can make some reasonable, quick suggestions on how these huge places that are currently vacant or barely surviving provide a much more valuable service than what they're doing now.
Head northwest on Ditmars Boulevard toward Flushing Bay Promenade.
I guess Michael's turning. Andrea, are you there?
Oh, did we lose her?
Does seem like her internet's in and out, but definitely, Vicky, I will take your notes into consideration. I don't think I heard an exact question.
Question, really, I don't have any. I know there's business inside out, and what I'm doing is offering some professional advice, because I often find that politicians debate these things without really engaging professionals who do the nitty-gritty and can offer tremendous amount of helpful information on how this can be done and done quickly. I mean, hotels, are inherently sleeping places, and so almost all of the systems are in place. And it's a terrific idea to convert these temporary R1s into R2s. And I think it's a lot less complicated if you speak to architects, like I said, who do this on a daily basis and will give you some terrific ideas on how to make this happen, as long as legislation also comes along the way and doesn't enforce, the ridiculous, 5-foot corridor that's not going to go to 6 feet. We don't need that much. What we really need is affordable homes and a sense of peace for people to have their own space. And yes, we do need kitchens. You cannot put people without we don't have a kitchen. You can have a kitchenette, which is perfectly good. It has a stove.
All right, I see Lizzie taking copious notes.
Thank you, Lizzie.
No, she'll take that point back. Thanks, Vicky. Let's go to Michael Kramer. Then we're going to go round 2 back to Alice, and then Michael has thought of something he'd like to say. Michael Kramer.
Tammy sort of asked the same question I was going to ask, so I just wanted to echo what she said and also say that, we do need affordable housing south of Chambers Street, and we should take this opportunity. And then also that, there are different styles of housing these days, and that we should think about, some of the new styles of live-work housing and things like that could be accommodated. It's not just because there are, single people with young children, those kinds of things, and it's a different world these days. It's not so straightforward as some of the old housing solutions. So. The only other thing I have to add is there should be more affordable housing at 5 World Trade Center. And that's the end of my comments.
I'll just say here to Michael on that one.
Here. Let's echo Michael's comment about 5 World Trade and what our electeds could do to help us. Woo!
Yes.
And I was just going to say that I think above all with what's being presented here is affordable housing. And I would never, and I agree with Vicky, I would never advocate for putting up roadblocks unnecessarily because a building didn't have a kitchen or it didn't have, precisely legislatively correct accessibility. I mean, I think it's critical that we move ahead in, as Michael's pointing out, many creative ways out there. There are groups that do this now, like Breaking Ground, where there are communal kitchens, the use of WeWork kinds of paradigms. So I would just want to offer that up. I think that we need to prioritize what's really being stated here. And I agree, something below Chambers Street, and something that really underlines the unbelievable need. And I just want to underline this by saying what we just saw happening over at the New Market building with this recent tragedy really, really underlines how critically important affordable housing is in our community. So there we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Michael Francoeur.
Yeah, I just wanted to say Hey, thanks so much for the work your office is doing on this. I couldn't, agree with everyone more. I really support this effort to convert, commercial, or well, I guess this is hotels into affordable housing. My question is, I guess I have kind of three questions, but I'll just wrap them all up together and let you answer them. One was, you had mentioned Senator Januris's bill. Are you aware of what other legislation is out there kind of percolating in Albany on this this general idea that we would or that you would recommend us looking at? Two, I know it's more costly and there's a lot more issues when it comes to converting commercial buildings, but has your office thought about or working on any like legislative stuff that would target commercial buildings? And I had, oh yes, the last one is again, yeah, I support this. What's the big like impediment to getting this passed in the budget in Albany, and how can we help make that happen?
So on your first question, no, there really aren't any other kind of pieces of legislation worth noting. It's an issue that I think a lot of legislatures are interested in, but it's really hard to tackle, and it's hard to do well. We're not saying that our legislation is the be all end all of what conversion should look like, and we are open to more conversations. Right now, the limit on the distance to a residentially zoned unit is 800 feet, but someone can tell me that should be 400 feet, and I am open to that. So it's really complicated because it's one, very of the moment. Two, there's not any funding for it right now. I don't know if anyone here knows anything about the supportive housing pipeline for the city and the state, but basically things get in the pipeline and years in advance. So all of the money that you would normally use for acquisition and transition costs is kind of already accounted for. So to the extent that there is some acquisition money in the recently passed by the Senate American Rescue Plan, I guess is what we've decided to call it. I think there's about $5 billion in the country for acquisition costs, and we hope that some of that that ends up in the state could be used for this. There's always the dream that next week is infrastructure week, and part of that infrastructure is building affordable and supportive housing, and some of that money could be used to do this as well. So it's a weird issue as far as timing, because one, there is no better time to do it than now, but if you don't accompany it with additional money, it's not really clear that anything's going to happen. So we want the framework in place so that if the money comes, that we can do this, there will be already a pathway forward. And your third question was, we haven't looked at any specific legislation, or second question, related to commercial buildings. It's something that has been talked about a lot. I know that Assembly Member Shimborans, who is chair of the Housing Committee on the Assembly side, has had a hearing about it. I know it's something that Rebney has discussed a lot. One of the bigger issues, which I'm sure members of your board could also speak to, is the internal density, the Florida area ratios on commercial housing. There's a lot of interior space, commercial buildings. There's a lot of interior space and not a lot of space that's outward facing. So it'd be really, it's a more difficult puzzle to the extent that you want to give people some level of quality of life as far as air and light. But we are open to any proposals that people might have on this issue, because it is important. We just don't have any legislation on it yet because we haven't figured out how best to do this well. Sorry, and now I missed your third question.
Just what's blocking it from getting passed, or what are the obstacles in Albany right now, and how can we help make sure it gets passed in the budget?
Well, the governor has his proposal, and the governor is want to do the governor's idea is a great place to start. We do have executive budgeting in New York, so the governor proposes a budget. We come back with our one house budgets, which are suggestions, because he gets to craft the final budget and then we vote up and down. So I would say that Andrew Cuomo, in whatever state he might or might not be in at the moment, is a big impediment. There is some concern about the types of hotels that the Hotel Trades Council would or would not be willing to open for conversion, because once you get into the bigger hotels in Midtown and Central Manhattan, those are good union jobs that they are afraid to lose, regardless of what the vacancy rate is right now, for good reasons. We are full supporters of quality union jobs that, quite frankly, before the Hotel Trades Council were not great jobs. But you know, there's some different forces at work. But we do hope that something, whether it's you know, hybrid legislation, we are working with Senator Janaris's office to, you know, kind of bridge the differences in our two approaches. So we do hope that there will be something in well, at least in our one house, and then we'll see where the assembly is and where the governor lands.
Got it. Thanks so much. The one last question is, you guys specify Class B hotels in your in the bill. I'm not familiar with the different classes of hotels. What is Class B?
1 second. Class B would be, I think if I remember correctly, I had this written up in my notes and now I can't find it. Class B has to do with, Class B is the type of buildings, and it has to do with the Florida area ratio that they currently have, I think. I can get you a better response on that later.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just like the logic, I guess, but behind singling out one class versus another would be awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, guys. We're going to go to members of the public now. I see Eric Dillenberger has his hand up, and after him, Victoria. Sorry, there's no last name there, but Victoria, you'll be second to Eric Dillenberger. Eric?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
All right,
Welcome
excellent.
again.
Thank you so much for letting me speak, and thank you so much for coming down. You know, I feel like nobody could argue that there isn't an affordability crisis and that we don't need to find some kind of workable solution to this. But I feel like there's also a very slow-moving iceberg approaching us with this proposal, and that is there's an enormous potential for legal, moral, and ethical conflicts of interest in the way that this thing is formulated. I don't feel like the government has any rightful place in this market in this format. I don't see why the private sector couldn't be given these same zoning tools to do the conversions. And the moral conflict comes from the idea that the government controls taxation, they control what the water and sewer fees are, building codes, violations, and fines, etc. And the small building and property owners in our district are under tremendous pressure, as is anybody right now from COVID. But the pressure they're under now is that in addition to the government controlling the expenses, they also have control over the revenue. So at the same time, the government's telling us that we can and cannot collect rent, and we can and cannot raise or lower, you know, rents, and lowering rent is what the market's doing. Raising rent is not an option, and in effect, you can't even cover expenses. So to give an example of where I think this could end up being like is what happened with the taxi industry, where the New York City controlled the issuing and sales of the medallions, and yet at the same and policed the living daylights out of that group of taxi owners, and at the same time allowed Uber and Lyft to come in and compete with almost no regulation and effectively wipe them out. And the net result was that there was a giant lawsuit filed by the state attorney general to try to protect the taxi owners who had been in fact victimized by their own government. So the same thing could happen in this case, where the government's saying, all right, you know, we're going to push you in the corner by continuously either not giving you any tax relief, and we're also not allowing you to collect any rent. And let's just sit there on the side and be the rescuers in the white hats buying these properties from you guys. And in effect, they're portraying themselves as the good actor in the equation, but in reality, they're wearing a black hat too. And as a builder, having worked in the private sector and in the public sector, I can tell you unequivocally that for every dollar I spent in the private sector building, every like 98 to 95 cents of that dollar gets spent on actual construction, not factoring in interest, right? But in the public sector, for every dollar you spend on construction, you're going to get 20 to 30 cents worth of construction. So I feel like you can do the same proposal working on the zoning side and get the same results, and let the private sector take the first shot at it. So this way you eliminate the conflict of interest and you don't end up in the Supreme Court. Anyway, that's everything. I don't actually have a question. It's just it's really a moral implication to warn you about what could be down the road for you if you're not careful.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Andrea, I don't know if you want to just take note of that, or if you have anything.
There's nothing in our bill or in the governor's proposed language that would mandate that the state would be the ones doing these conversions. In fact, the Ted Pardell is open to any developer, and our language would be open to any developer as approved by HPD. So a list of supportive housing providers that are both nonprofit and for-profit. But I believe that Lizzie might have flagged at the beginning of this that we do have a conflicting meeting at 7. So
Sure. So let's take Victoria, if you can unmute yourself. You will be our last question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Hi, Audra. This is a very, very exciting bill. Obviously, we need the hotels. We are loft tenants, and so we're certainly into repurposing buildings. I am a designer. I am absolutely over the moon that Vicky agrees. We all can do amazing things to build out great space, small space, and it's very important for people to have homes. My one concern is, and it really speaks to the laws that will be backing this. In other words, my concern is this is not a temporary bailout, but that we're recreating what the SRO laws used to represent, and that we are turning this into permanent housing that would be governed under rent stabilization or the SRO laws, that once we convert it, it's not a temporary fix, but we are converting these hotels into permanent housing for all of the reasons that everyone says, whether it's our young children that don't have a place to live in the area. And by the way, communal kitchens are very fun. Little kitchenettes are very fun. This is great space. Everyone can have fun. It doesn't have to be about a lot of money. These places are built out. So this is very easy to tinker with it. And let's face it, we're New York. We're all very talented and have something to contribute. My concern is that we're not bailing out the hotel industry. Certainly, we've seen many of our SROs, whether it be the Jane Hotel, the horror the Chelsea Hotel is going through at this moment, that there are protections that this goes into, whether it goes into rent stabilization or whether it goes into SRO. I believe as a community, we need to demand it. In other words, we're going to be bailing them out. We need to get our ask. And I think that we need to be very careful driving a very hard bargain with the hotel industry, because they will get what they want, use us, abuse us, and turn it right back into hotels. That, in other words, that we're fixing the problem, not putting a Band-Aid on it. So, in other words, legislatively, I think that we have to look at those aspects. But I think it's exciting and fun, and everybody's so excited about it.
Thank you, Victoria.
Sure.
Andrea or Lizzie, any further comments? Any other thoughts?
I just want to reiterate that we definitely agree that, long-term affordability is our ultimate goal. It is why we're not supportive of the governor's current budget language, because it doesn't even it requires 25% affordability, but it doesn't actually dictate what affordability means. I think that I just want to note that our bill is S4937. Senator Janaris's bill is S5257. If anyone wants to look that up. And while I'm here on Community Board 1, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that this might be Lizzie Lee's last Community Board meeting with you. As she transitions to do legislative work like this more fully in her office, I just wanted her to get the shout out that she deserves on CB1.
Well, thanks for letting us know that. Yeah, Lizzie.
No. That's not fair. Lizzie didn't get approval to leave us. That's not fair.
No, I have
chair of CB1. I'm saying that's not fair. You got to stay with us.
I hear you, Madam Chair, and I will always be available to you all. Please feel free to email me. I'm still going to be very, very deeply rooted in CB1 and all things community board related. So if there's anything else that I can follow up with as well, just please let us know.
Oh, we'll keep in touch. Don't worry.
I'm sure you will. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you both for attending and helping us with this discussion tonight. So committee members, this is on our agenda as a discussion and possible resolution. Would like to see if folks have strong opinions one way or another, whether we think we're at place for a resolution, whether we think that the quality of life resolution that CB1 adopted last month is a good placeholder at the moment, and then we continue to keep an eye on this as things progress and weigh in April if we need to with something more substantive. As Diana says, I think we have a stake in the ground at this point, but I'd open it up and see what other folks think.
I support that position that you've just said, Patrick. Plan B, yeah.
Okay. Not hearing a strong groundswell of desire to write a resolution right now. I think we can rely then on the resolution that's out there, and we'll keep an eye on this, and certainly Diana and I will be following up. So with that, all right, let's go to our second item. This is a continuation of what we started last month, which is more discussion on the planning together, the city's comprehensive planning framework legislation. Since we got an update last month, there was an initial hearing, which the council's representative said that there would be one likely scheduled for last month. In fact, it did go forward, and we had Tammy submitted a chairperson's letter that I think quite succinctly, but really in a nice way set out the concerns that we as a community board would have with this legislation and the 10-year comprehensive planning proposal that's out there. I went back and listened again to the presentation that we got last month. Diana sent those links out, and I understood it a little bit better as I was listening to it. It almost sounds like sort of an adjunct to, I mean, there are of course all kinds of input problems with it, but I saw it as something that's sort of adjunct to the current ULURP process and doesn't change entirely the current ULURP process, but it does seem to put something out there that we don't have a lot of input on. So hopefully folks have had a chance to look at Tammy's February 19th, 2021 chairperson's letter that was submitted in advance of the council's committee hearings. We still don't know where this is going from here, but this is more of, we have no presentation on this. This is just an internal discussion for us to discuss whether we want to take a further stake on this, further position on this, or live with what Tammy has put out there so far as our official position of CB1. So, Diane, I thought you might have some sort of thinking you were envisioning if this does go to a resolution.
Yeah, I'll pull up Tammy's letter in a second. I sent a lot of materials out over the weekend. God bless everybody who took a look. There's a lot of content from the city council hearings, including hundreds of pages of testimony. What was really striking to me in particular was how damning the testimony was from the Department of City Planning. which has obviously a lot of insight into how this might affect land use planning in the city. And I'd like to go through that quickly, because I think that's a great expert opinion. And for anybody interested in taking a look at the testimony, it is in that email, but I'll share it in a moment. I just want to hit some highlights, and then we'll go to Tammy's letter, which I think outlines our concerns and our general thinking on this, which I also circulated the borough president's testimony, which was really closely aligned in ours, and general concerns about community input and what our concerns are at this stage. Technically, the community board doesn't have a position on this yet, because we didn't have time to adopt a position in time for this hearing. That's why Tammy did a chairperson letter based on last month's meeting. And based on that, I would recommend that we do a resolution, echoing what's in Tammy's letter, maybe expanding on that if we want. So we have, I see Tammy emphatically nodding her head. Thank you, Tammy. So we put that stake in the ground. And part of what's troublesome about this is that we don't know how much time we have with this. We don't know. There's a lot of speculation as to when it might be taken it up, and a lot of fear, and I think legitimately so, that we don't know the speed at which this might be taken through or when it might go to a vote. So I think that stake in the ground is important. Knowing that for as much time as we have, we'll continue to research this, discuss it. We've been talking about the idea of a panel, bringing on, pros and cons and different perspectives, but at least for now, we should get word on record. But let me pull up that testimony so I can go through it quickly.
It's 308 pages, I think, for folks who are keeping score at home.
308, you're correct. Can you see this city planning testimony?
Yeah.
Okay. I highlighted some parts here. Generally that they didn't believe, and anybody who wants to see the video, I couldn't link directly to it, but there's 6+ hours of hearing video for anybody who's interested in that. If you are, reach out to me, I'll make sure that you can access it. But there's a lot of heated exchange with the Department of City Planning, who had concerns with this one-size-fits-all approach, specifically that the ultimate impact and the money would be counter to a lot of the goals that have been set out by the city, that it creates a lot more bureaucracy instead of, cutting through the red tape, which makes it so onerous now. The fact that it outlines just 9.5 months to essentially create 177 individual plans. It would be impossible for this type of top-down planning to achieve quality or equity or be responsive to community input. They reference One NYC 2050, which is the quadrennial long-term plan that we have right now, which a lot of the city planning is based off of, which the chair of the City Planning Commission thought was preferable, or a better model for strengthening our planning efforts than this bill. And this was very shocking to me in particular, that the cost of the environmental impact statements required would be at least $500 million. And that doesn't include the bureaucratic cost of setting up the infrastructure for all of this. And it goes on to say, the impact, again, would likely to be counterproductive. This quote in particular, the bill suggests that council members would often decline to call up actions determined by the City Planning Commission to be aligned with the plan, which I know was one particular concern that the board had, in that, if we adopt these plans, which we are unclear on how much input individual community boards would have, there's a lot of concern that this would be a very top-down approach, that we would get, a courtesy presentation or not much interaction or direction on how these plans take form, select one of 3. And then if future ULURPs or individual applications go through, if they align with that plan, that they might skip us over entirely. There's a lot to be concerned about here. And I'll pull up Tammy's letter, which I think, I hope most people read it. I think it outlines our concerns pretty well. Would you like me to read this, Patrick?
My mouse button's not working to come off mute. Yeah, I think it would be helpful to just read it out loud. It's relatively short, but it's really good and to the
Sure.
point.
Nope. All right, here we go. Our office has recently learned that the New York City Council Committee on Governmental Operations will be holding a hearing on February 23rd, a local law to amend the New York City Charter in relation to requiring a comprehensive long-term plan. Manhattan Community Board 1 reached out and scheduled a presentation for our February 8th land use meeting with Annie Levers, Assistant Deputy Director of the Office of Strategic Initiatives of the New York City Council. The presentation on this proposal was very complex for a single meeting, and CB1 has serious concerns regarding this proposal, how engagement is being conducted, and the speed at which approval may be sought. Even after our February meeting, we need further information and follow-up, which will need to be answered and discussed in time for the board to adopt a March 2021 resolution. As we understand, each New York City Community Board is not being individually briefed on this proposal, but rather presentations are conducted by request. This in and of itself gets the proposal off on the wrong foot. If this proposal intends to manifest a real opportunity for community-based representative planning, it must first be vetted by local communities. At this stage, a hearing is being conducted before most community boards have had an opportunity to review this proposal. Since the conception of the modern land use review process in New York City, communities have been at an inherent disadvantage. ULURP, a process designed to ensure community engagement, has been reduced to a process by which community boards have a very brief window to comment on near finalized projects and which rarely inspires real change. Many concerns have been raised that this long-term comprehensive planning proposal could result in a process that similarly imposes top-down plans onto communities that haven't been involved in the planning itself, but who then have the largely ceremonial function of providing advisory comment during the final stages. Further, there is concern that after these long-term plans are adopted, it would further minimize the role of community boards during review of individual applications in the ULURP process, where greater weight may be placed on adherence to these long-term plans rather than guidance from local communities. Finally, CB1 is particularly concerned by the amount of oversight by the mayor's office as part of this proposal, specifically as it relates to community engagement. CB1 has experienced a very challenging track record of engagement by the mayor's office in recent years, especially regarding major projects like borough-based jails. Though engagement was explicitly promised during earlier stages of the plan, actual community engagement has been at worst non-existent and at best poor. We urge the New York City Council to take pause in consideration of this proposal until local communities have a real chance to review and develop opinion on it. CB1 is not opposed to the concept of long-term comprehensive planning, but in order for it to be successful, it must be rooted in local community-based planning.
So that's our position as it stands out there now. I encourage everyone to read our President Brewer's testimony that she submitted. I think it was equally succinct and pointed out many of these same issues and how the community really could potentially be frozen out of setting the goalposts for whether future land use actions and zoning actions qualify for the long-term plan. So with that, I just want to open it up and see if folks have thoughts or if there's interest in doing a resolution in addition to this. I mean, I think we do have some additional time, as Dana pointed out, to become more educated on this. We do have a position out there already. And as more becomes known, and of course, as the legislation likely changes over time, as these things do, it may be more appropriate to do a resolution later on. But that's my opinion, and welcome others' thoughts. Oh, we are a quiet bunch today.
Well, I mean, hi. You know, I'm actually went to 4 hours of that meeting and actually read about 250 of those testimonies. I will say there's a consistency to them, which I found really interesting. I mean, I think that you've covered the basics. I think the only thing that I would personally say, for what the little that's worth, is that, there's something to be said. And many of the testimonies, including Gail's, identified the need to consider the comprehensive plan as a very valuable tool that's been missing from the city since, 1962 and, Mayor Lindsay or whoever it was. And so, I don't know. I don't know if it's essential to write a resolution at this point. I'm not sure that any of us have enough, information maybe to go further than this one. I would just say that if we are, I would just want to make sure that we have some level of support that's pretty well identified for the idea of a way to have a plan that looks at the city holistically and ensures that the city addresses citywide issues, that it doesn't and looks at them, comprehensively. But anyway, with that, it sounds like we're not going to probably do that. I have many notes I would add to a resolution, but I think this approach seems fine, and you could wait and see what else comes down the pike, and then, invite people to speak on it if that becomes something that everyone's interested in doing. I don't know, but that, I think it's, anyway, that's my thought.
Thanks, Alice. Anybody else want to just jump in? Oh, I see we do have hands up. I see Michael Kramer's hands up and Tammy's hands up.
I was going to say that at one point I was involved with another community board and we did 197A plans. And, I think that that's really the best way to do master planning, is from the bottom up rather than the top down. And one of the problems with this is that it doesn't give the community boards enough resources to work with Diana and others, to really put together a comprehensive plan. And I'm just looking at the definition of a 197A plan: to sponsor plans for the development, growth, and improvement of the city, authorizes the community board along with city planning to guide future actions of city agencies in the areas addressed in the plans. It's a better way of doing things, and I just think that we shouldn't lose that tool, that opportunity. So I think giving the community boards more resources and the ability to take advantage of what's there already is a good thing. And I was involved with the West Chelsea plan, and it really made a difference.
And those plans, they take several years to develop, certainly less than a 10-year.
It took us about a year and a half to put it together.
But all told, from the beginning of the process through.
Yeah, until it was adopted.
Okay, that's pretty good. That is definitely something I think we could point to as, sort of further evidence that community needs to be driving force behind the plan.
So I think I'm going to jump in and say that what I would love to see us look at, because I think that there's a trepidation coming from the committee in terms of how to tackle something quite this large. And much like zoning for coastal flood resiliency, where we had numerous presentations and we had pluses and minuses, and we ended up having to hire a consultant to help us understand how that would directly impact CB1. I think we may be in a position where we should bring people in, and whether it's from the borough president's office, and Anthony, I see you on this call as well, or from the council member's office, and have some of the land use discussions, talk about the difference between a 197 plan versus what they're doing here. Where does the community have the opportunity to opine and not? Because we've talked about holistic, for decades, and about how in Lower Manhattan, we have a really unique structure. And part of my concerns with the holistic planning is you're not going to be, if you take the Grand Street, if you take a look at Grand Central area, it could not be further different from the FIDI with the historic street grid possible. We just don't have that landscape here. People talk all the time, well, you can do on Chamber Street the same thing you did on 14th and 23rd. Well, maybe if you widen the street by 2 lanes in each direction, we could think of that. And so for those kinds of things, we want a holistic plan, but I think it has to be very targeted to the neighborhood you're talking about. And that's why I potentially think that we should keep this on the agenda. If we're not ready to do a resolution tonight, bring in and have some analysis done of how this is different than 197 and what options are out there that this would either remove or enhance.
Great idea. All great points. So maybe a panel is the way to go. If many things going on, but I don't know if we can pull together in time for April, but certainly by May.
I think the question, and maybe I know Anthony Drummond's on, and I'm sorry to keep pointing at you, even though your mic's not on, but the question I'm going to ask is, do we have time? That's the most important thing to know. Is this going to come to a council member vote and we will not have time to really have due deference on it? That is the greatest concern. And if Cora knows, who's from Council Member Chin's office, or anybody else from our, esteemed elected panels, can basically advocate for the time and complete information, that would be great.
I do recall our presenter last month mentioning, and it's really just a goalpost that we all sort of know exists, is that the council speaker wanted to see this done in this term, which is before the end of the year. I think obviously politically we all understand that. But whether that's a month, 4 months, who knows? And I'm not hearing from Cora or Anthony, so perhaps we can get more information and visit it again soon.
Hello.
Oh, hey, Cora. How about it?
Echo.
Cora,
Typing in the chat.
me, we can hear you. And I got a message from Anthony Drummond that he can speak if we would like him to, which I think we would like you to, Anthony. Whatever information you have on the status of this proposal or expected next steps, where your office is at, all of that good stuff. Or provide it to me in the chat and I will read it out for you. And if we can't get it tonight, then I'll follow up with you separately.
Diane, I think if I'm looking at the technology, Anthony's having mic issues because he doesn't show that he has a microphone turned on.
Yeah, I see that too. I just got a message from him that he's going to type it to me in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, once we get that, then we'll have a better idea. But I think we're nearing the end of our meeting for this one. So we'll wait for Anthony's signal.
While we're waiting, I'll let people know that in April, we're expecting a big comprehensive update on the World Trade Center campus and 5 World Trade Center with the Port Authority, Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, Empire State Development Corporation, Brookfield and Silverstein. So anybody interested in that, which I assume many of us are, please join. It's going to be a good update. We haven't had a World Trade Center update in some time. That's both the campus and 5 World Trade in particular. So
and keeping with the theme of things we're going to see in the future, I would encourage folks to attend this month's Landmarks Committee meeting later this week, where 250 Water Street will be revisited. Right, Tammy? Nodding yes. And many of us attended that the first time around because it seems to be obviously the first step in that whole process, and something that an application that will get before our committee eventually if it passes through Landmarks. And so we want to be as educated as possible. So I do encourage folks to attend that. I think that's Thursday night. Or is it Wednesday?
Landmarks, 250 Water Street will be presenting to Landmarks on Thursday. We sent a letter to LPC requesting that they not rule until we've had a chance to pass a resolution through the full board, which they agreed to, which I was very graciously excited about. And, but at the same time, you know, they are working on their DEIS, which I assume will go to environmental. And the developer is also working on the ULURP in the hopes that it will pass Landmarks. So I suspect that we will have a robust spring.
All right, Diana, do you have an update from Anthony?
I suspect he's typing right now because he just said that he's typing. So I think he's working on it. And while we were talking, I just got a response from him, but I just want to squeeze in that we'll be getting a handful of citywide zoning text amendments in the next couple of months. Between now and May, there's going to be lots of applications trying to get in before the summer. One called zoning for transit accessibility, which is what it sounds like. We have a lot of transit improvement incentives in Lower Manhattan. It's an expansion of what we already have in Lower Manhattan. Another one related to special permits in hotels, and a couple that don't exactly relate to us, like the Fresh program. So I believe a press release went out today, so you'll be seeing more information about that in the coming weeks. And I'll read from Anthony. As Anthony Drummond, who's land use for the city council member's office, Margaret Chin. As for our office, we are reviewing this plan as well. I've been having conversations with the council member about this plan. In terms of timeline, they're not confirmed yet. This may end up coming for a vote sometime after the budget is done. I will need to have that conversation with the speaker's office and our council land use division, but I am monitoring this very closely for the council member and will be in conversation with Diana, and that's me.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. I think the budget, if I'm remembering correctly, is due by the summertime. So it sounds like we have ourselves a month or two, perhaps. Okay. Unless there's anything else, I think we can, since we are going to have, as Tammy said, a very robust spring, I think we can give ourselves a little bit of a break and get out of here now. So unless anybody has anything else, I wish everybody a very happy rest of the week. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Diana.